How's it going, guys, and welcome back to another video. Now, if you live on the east coast of Australia like me, you'll know we had a very rainy start to the year, which absolutely destroyed our inshore viz for quite a number of months. However, before all that viz came along, we did have a little stretch there with some clear water, and I managed to get out and make the most of it. Now, the first dive I want to focus on was actually my very first dive of the year back in January. And it started on a nice little spot that we had ran over the previous year on a line mission that I'd never actually dove before. So we decided with the weather and the viz, we'd go and have a look. When sailing over this spot, it was evident that a lot of the bait that was previously here had moved on, but we decided we'd have a go anyway. There wasn't a lot of fish life, but we did find a couple of nice crayfish. I believe Kane had found this cray a bit late in his dive and wasn't able to pull it out before he ran out of breath, so I dove down to give him a hand and was able to secure the cray. After grabbing those couple of crays, we did spend a bit of time sounding around this area in hopes to find a bit more ground. We never found anything stand out and decided not to get back in the water, but on the way home I decided we'd stop at one of my old spots to grab a feed of fish to go with our crays. On my first dive here, I landed on a bit of a ledge that looks down towards some more rocky boulder type country. There was a stack of fish here sitting around the bottom of the ledge, but nothing particularly desirable, so I found a rock to lay on and waited to see if anything better would come in. After 30 seconds or so, I noticed the silhouette of a nice tusky coming in, and this guy couldn't have given me a better shot. I threw that guy in the esky and went back for another dive, only this time I landed right on top of a much larger tusk fish. This fish was pretty calm with my presence, and I knew it would have been a PB for Kane, so I decided not to take the shot in the hopes that he could have a crack at it. Unfortunately though, it must not have been as calm as I'd thought, as we never really saw it again. I spent the next few dives hiding in the rocks at the bottom of the ledge in the hopes that something desirable would show up. There was a stack of fish around, including a bunch of nice sized gold spot cod, but nothing really stood out to me, although Kane did manage to suit himself a nice sized coral trout. As most spearos in Queensland will tell you, there's only so long you can dive one spot before the sharks start to gain a bit of interest. So with this guy starting to hang around, we called it a day. Not long after that trip, the barramundi season was open again, so I pretty much turned my whole focus to those guys. It took a few trips, but we did manage to get some really nice ones, and you can see all that in a previous one of my videos. But after getting onto those barra and just before that rain started, I did manage to get another nice inshore mission done and we snagged some really good fish.
I got reports the day before this trip that we had some pretty good viz around, so I went to a spot I hadn't dove in a while. As you can see, the good viz obviously hadn't made it into this area, but with the amount of bait on the bottom, I had to have a couple drops. With the lack of viz here, I was having a lot of trouble locating the main structures, but luckily after 2 to 3 dives looking for it, I crossed paths with this nice tusk fish and I was able to get a shot off.
That was better. After a good start with that guy in the box, we decided we'd move on and look for a bit better viz. The next spot we came to looked a lot clearer and the tide had slowed down, so I decided we'd chuck out the anchor, and Mark and I geared up, jumped in, and we got stuck into a few good ones.
On my first dive, I spotted this nice grassy sweetlip sitting between 2 rocks. These guys can be super flighty, so I attempted to just sink towards him for a shot. Quartering shots like this seem to be one of a few angles where fish can actually dodge a spear, or at least it makes me feel better looking at it that way. But luckily for me, my shot seemed to spook a rather good sized coral trout into his cave, so I began to breathe up to have a crack at that guy. As I got back to the bottom, I peeked my head under that ledge to see that coral trout tucked up against the rock, so I lined him up and took the shot. On my way up, I noticed another good sized trout heading into a hole, and Mark actually managed to land a shot on a nice Spanish mackerel, although it tore off after a good run.
It's super long, but it's skinny out.
I told Mark about that other trout I had seen, and he managed to find and shoot it while I was dealing with this one. With plenty of action going on, I jumped back in only to be met by the ever-present sharks, so we pulled the pick and made a move.
With a few nice reefies now in the box and Mark losing that Spanish mackerel, we decided to head on to some artificials that hold a bunch of bait to see if we could find some more of those guys. Now, the current this day wasn't super strong with small tides, which does tend to turn the mackerel off a little bit. They're not as active, but when we got there, the sounder was lit up with bait and the water was clear, so we decided we'd have a go at it anyway.
We each had a few dives hanging around these blocks waiting for a mackerel to swim in, but they just never showed. We had a look inside before making the call to move on, but all we saw were a few cod and some other small reef fish.
With not much happening on that spot and only a couple hours of light left, we decided to move on to one last spot. Now, by the time we got here, the tide had changed, which put a little bit of a decline on the viz, but it was still plenty clear enough, so we jumped in to have a look.
When we first jumped in here, we were greeted by a large school of trevally. I had a few dives with these guys, hoping that all the life around would draw in one of those mackerel. but once again, they didn't show. After a few dives, my hope for a mackerel began to dwindle, so I decided I would try for redemption on that grassy instead. I spent a few dives laying close to the ledge, scratching the bottom and throwing some sand. After a while, I caught the attention of a coral trout, but with a couple already in the esky, I made the call not to shoot it. While I was watching this guy, a spangled emperor cruised in as well, and I figured he'd make a good enough consolation prize for my grassy. I could tell my shot here was pretty high, so I tried to pull the fish up as lightly as I could, but after a few seconds it was able to work itself free.
Not long after that, the sharks turned up again, and being late in the day, we decided it was time to throw in the towel. And it was only a short period after this trip when the skies opened up and did unspeakable things to the visibility here. But I suppose you can't be clear all the time. Anyway, if you're still here, cheers for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. And stick around as the visibility here has cleaned up again. I've got out and done some pretty cool diving. I've got some pretty cool footage there to throw together, so keep your eyes peeled.